There is a moment, quiet, invisible, and often misunderstood, when a person who has spent their entire life feeling everything suddenly stops. Not gradually, not politely, not in a way others can prepare for, but completely. And if you've never experienced it, you will misunderstand it. You will call it coldness. You will call it arrogance. You may even call it cruelty. But according to Carl Jung, this moment is none of those things. It is transformation. Jung spent decades studying the human psyche, its fractures, its defenses, its hidden architectures. And among the many patterns he observed, there was one that disturbed him more than most. Not because it was violent, but because of how silent it was. He described individuals, highly sensitive, deeply perceptive people who had spent years absorbing the emotions of others. They were the ones who understood without being told, the ones who forgave too easily, the ones who stayed long after they should have left. They weren't weak, they were open. And openness, when placed in the wrong environment, becomes a liability. Imagine a person who doesn't just hear words but feels the intention behind them, who doesn't just witness behavior but internalizes its emotional weight. Over time, this creates a subtle erosion of boundaries. They begin to carry things that were never theirs. Pain that wasn't theirs, guilt that wasn't theirs, responsibility that wasn't theirs, and the world praises them for it. You're so understanding, and you're so patient, you're different, but what the world doesn't see is the cost, because every time they silence their own discomfort to maintain peace, something inside them shifts, not loudly, but steadily. Jung noticed that this type of individual often finds themselves in repeated cycles of emotional exploitation, not because they seek it, but because they tolerate it. They explain away red flags, they rationalize harmful behavior. They give people the benefit of the doubt long after the evidence is clear. Why? Because they don't just see what is, they see what could be, and that ability to see potential in others is both their greatest gift and their most dangerous vulnerability. Over time, something begins to accumulate, not anger at first, but tension, a quiet internal pressure, the kind that doesn't explode immediately, but compresses, layer by layer. Each betrayal adds to it, each manipulation reinforces it, each moment of being misunderstood deepens it, and still they endure. From the outside, nothing seems wrong. They smile, they listen, they continue to show up, but internally something is changing, something that cannot be reversed once it reaches a certain point. Jung referred to this as a confrontation with the unconscious, where the parts of the self that have been suppressed for too long begin to surface, not gently, but with force. Because the psyche does not tolerate imbalance indefinitely. At some point it corrects itself, and when it does, it doesn't ask for permission. This is the moment most people never see coming. Because the empath doesn't announce it. They don't warn you. They don't gradually distance themselves in a way that invites discussion. Instead, something inside them clicks and everything changes. The person who once over-explained becomes silent. The person who once chased connection withdraws. The person who once absorbed everything suddenly absorbs nothing. And to those around them, it feels like a personality shift, like something has gone wrong. But in reality, something has finally gone right. Because what looks like detachment is often the first appearance of boundaries. What looks like coldness is often the absence of self-betrayal. What looks like indifference is often clarity. Jung didn't see this transformation as a breakdown. He saw it as integration, a necessary correction after years, sometimes decades, of imbalance between giving and receiving, between feeling and protecting, between understanding others and abandoning oneself. But here's where it becomes unsettling, because once this shift happens, it doesn't reverse. The empath who reaches this point doesn't go back to who they were. They don't become naive again, they don't ignore red flags again, they don't tolerate what once felt normal. Instead, they become something entirely different, not less emotional, but more selective, not less kind, but more precise, and most importantly, no longer available for manipulation. This is why Jung found it so striking. Because the transformation isn't just emotional, it's structural. It changes how the person perceives reality, relationships, and themselves. And for those who were used to the old version of them, it feels like losing control because the dynamic has shifted. The empath is no longer playing the role that made others comfortable. They are no longer overextending, overgiving, or overexplaining. They are no longer carrying emotional weight that doesn't belong to them, and that disrupts everything. But this isn't the end of the story, because what Jung discovered next is what makes this transformation truly unsettling. The moment the empath stops absorbing, they begin to see clearly, and what they see changes everything. Part 2, the moment of the snap. There is no dramatic explosion, no shouting, no visible breaking point that others can point to and say, that's when it happened. That's what makes it so unsettling, because when the shift begins, it happens internally, silently, and by the time anyone notices, it's already complete. For years, this person has been translating the world through emotion, reading between words, feeling the unspoken tension in a room, adjusting themselves constantly to maintain harmony. But something changes the moment the psyche decides it has endured enough. And this is where Carl Jung becomes essential to understand. Jung didn't describe this as losing control. He described it as regaining it through what he called the confrontation with the shadow. The shadow appears. The shadow in Jungian psychology is not evil. It is everything you were forced to suppress in order to be accepted. Your anger, your refusal, your boundaries, your capacity to say no without guilt. For an empath, the shadow becomes especially dense because their identity has been built around being good, understanding, tolerant. So what happens to all the moments where they wanted to say, no, this is not okay. I don't accept this. You are crossing a line. Those moments don't disappear. They get buried, and the deeper they are buried, the more pressure they build. The breaking mechanism. The snap is not an emotional outburst. It's a psychological reorganization, a moment where the unconscious says, enough, and begins pulling everything that was suppressed back to the surface. But here's the part most people misunderstand. This doesn't feel chaotic to the person experiencing it. It feels clear. For the first time, there is no internal conflict, no second guessing, no overanalysis, no emotional negotiation, just a quiet, unwavering certainty. The shift in perception. Before this moment, they saw people through layers of empathy. After this moment, they see patterns, not stories, not excuses. Patterns, they notice inconsistency in behavior. They recognize manipulation without needing proof. They sense intentions without needing confirmation. And once you see patterns clearly, you can't unsee them. Emotional detachment isn't what you think to outsiders. This is where things become uncomfortable. Because the empath who once responded immediately now pauses. The one who once explained everything now says very little. The one who once tried to fix every problem now watches and chooses. This isn't emotional numbness. It's emotional precision. They are no longer reacting to everything. They are deciding what deserves a reaction. Why people feel threatened. Here's the truth most won't admit. Many relationships were built on the empath's willingness to tolerate more than they should. Not consciously, but structurally, the empath absorbed tension, smoothed conflict, filled emotional gaps, and when that stops, the entire dynamic collapses. People who were comfortable suddenly feel exposed, because the empath is no longer buffering their behavior. They are reflecting it, clearly, without distortion. The emergence of boundaries. And this is where the real transformation begins. Because boundaries for this person are not something they learned from a book. They are something they earned through pain. Each boundary is a correction, a line drawn exactly where it should have been drawn years ago. And they don't explain these boundaries the way they used to. They don't negotiate them. They simply enforce them, quietly, consistently, without apology. The end of over-explaining. Before the shift, they felt the need to be understood, to justify their feelings, to explain their reactions, to make sure no one misinterpreted them. After the shift, that need disappears, not because they don't care, but because they no longer depend on external validation to confirm internal truth. They know what they feel, they know what they see, and that is enough. The most misunderstood phase. This is the phase where others start to say things like, you've changed, you're not the same anymore, you've become distant. And in a way, they're right. But what they don't realize is, this isn't a loss of identity. It's the first time the person is actually aligned with themselves. The hidden power of the snap. Jung believed that true psychological development requires integrating both light and dark aspects of the self. And this moment, the snap, is where that integration begins. Because now the empath is no longer operating from only compassion. They have access to discernment, to firmness, to emotional self-protection. They are no longer just someone who understands others. They are someone who understands themselves. And that changes everything. Because once you understand yourself, you stop accepting what contradicts you. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop staying where you are not respected. And perhaps most importantly, you stop betraying yourself for the comfort of others. But this transformation doesn't end with clarity, because clarity comes with a cost. A realization that is often more painful than everything that came before. Part 3. The cost of clarity. Clarity is often described as freedom. And in many ways it is. But what no one tells you is that clarity also isolates. Because once you see people clearly, you cannot go back to relating to them the way you used to. Not because you don't want to, but because the illusion is gone. Now, before this transformation, connection came easily. Not because the connections were always healthy, but because you were willing to bridge the gaps. You filled in what was missing. You understood what wasn't said. You tolerated what shouldn't have been tolerated. You made it work. But after the shift, you stop doing that. And suddenly, relationships that once felt natural start to feel forced. The loneliness no one talks about. This is where the real cost begins. Not in losing people, but in realizing how many connections depended on a version of you that no longer exists. And this realization is quiet. There are no dramatic endings, no final arguments that close the chapter, just a gradual awareness that something is off, that conversations feel shallow, that dynamics feel imbalanced, that your presence is no longer being met with the same depth you now carry. And this creates a kind of loneliness that is difficult to explain, because you are not alone. You are surrounded by people, but you are no longer met. Why depth becomes rare? After this transformation, your threshold changes. You no longer engage in conversations that avoid truth. You no longer invest in connections that lack mutual awareness. You no longer feel comfortable in dynamics where you have to shrink to maintain harmony. And because of this, your world becomes quieter, more selective, more intentional. The misinterpretation. To others, this can look like distance, like withdrawal, like disinterest. You don't open up like you used to. You're harder to reach now. You've become too closed off. But that's not what's happening. You're not closed, you're filtered. The end of emotional over-availability. There was a time when you were available for everything, every problem, every emotion, every crisis that wasn't yours to carry. And people came to rely on that. They expected it. They built their access to you around it. But now, access is no longer automatic. It's earned. And this is where many people struggle to adapt, because they don't know how to meet you at this level. They only knew how to receive from you when you were giving without limits. The internal conflict. Even with all this clarity, there is still a moment of doubt, a quiet question that surfaces in the stillness. Was I too harsh? Did I change too much? Should I go back to how I was? And this is where the transformation is tested, because returning to your old self would feel easier, familiar, socially accepted. But it would also feel wrong, because once you've experienced alignment, misalignment becomes unbearable. What Carl Jung understood. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself, requires separation, not from people entirely, but from unconscious patterns, from roles you were assigned but never chose, from identities that were built around being needed rather than being authentic. And this stage, the loneliness, the filtering, the quiet distance, is not a regression. It is a recalibration. The power you didn't realize you had. There is something else that emerges here, something subtle but powerful. Your presence begins to change, not louder, not more dominant, but more grounded. You speak less, but when you do, it carries weight. You react less, but when you do, it is intentional. You engage less, but when you do, it is real. And people feel this, even if they don't understand it. Some will respect it, some will be drawn to it, and others will feel uncomfortable around it, because clarity in one person exposes confusion in another. The final realizations, at some point the question shifts. It's no longer, why don't people understand me? It becomes, why did I spend so long trying to be understood by those who never tried to understand me? And that question changes everything, because now your focus is no longer on being accepted, it's on being aligned. And once that shift happens, you stop chasing connection, you start recognizing it. But there is one final stage, because this transformation isn't just about detaching from what no longer serves you. It's about building something new, a different way of connecting, a different way of existing, a different way of being in the world. Part 4, psychological sovereignty. There comes a point in this transformation where something settles, not in a dramatic way, not in a way that announces itself to the world, but internally, deep, stable, and undeniable, a sense that you are no longer reacting to life. You are standing within it. This is what Carl Jung described in his own language as the later stages of individuation. Not perfection, not constant peace, but wholeness. What wholeness actually means. Wholeness is not becoming only your best self, it is becoming your complete self. It means you no longer reject parts of who you are to maintain an image. You no longer suppress your anger to appear kind. You no longer hide your strength to make others comfortable. You no longer dilute your truth to avoid conflict. Instead, you integrate. Your empathy remains, but it is no longer limitless. Your kindness remains, but it is no longer unconditional. Your understanding remains, but it is no longer self-sacrificing. You are no longer divided between who you are and who you think you need to be. The end of internal negotiation. Before this stage, every decision involved tension. Should I say something? Should I stay quiet? Am I overreacting? Am I being too sensitive? A constant internal dialogue, a constant second guessing. But now, that dialogue quiets. Not because you stop thinking, but because you stop doubting yourself. You recognize your signals, you trust your perceptions, you act without needing to justify your existence. Right? And this creates something rare. Emotional independence. This is not detachment from people, it is detachment from dependence. You no longer rely on others to regulate your emotions. You no longer seek constant reassurance to feel secure. You no longer measure your worth based on how you are treated. Your stability comes from within, and because of that, no one can destabilize you the way they once could. Why? Manipulation stops. Working manipulation depends on predictable reactions. Guilt, fear, the need to be liked, the fear of losing connection. But when those levers no longer control you, the entire system breaks. When someone tries to guilt you, you recognize it and you don't absorb it. When someone tries to provoke you, you see it and you don't react automatically. When someone tries to pull you back into old dynamics, you feel it and you choose differently. Not aggressively, not defensively, just clearly. And clarity is difficult to manipulate. The shift in relationships. At this stage, your relationships change again, but this time not through loss, through alignment. You begin to attract different kinds of people. People who don't require you to overextend, people who don't benefit from your lack of boundaries, people who meet you rather than use you. And the difference is immediate. There is no tension, no underlying imbalance, no sense that you have to earn your place. Just mutual presence. The quiet confidence. There is something else that appears here, something that doesn't need to be proven. Confidence, not loud, not performative, not dependent on validation, but grounded, stable, unaffected by external fluctuations. You no longer feel the need to convince anyone of who you are because you are not questioning it yourself. The freedom. Most people never reach. Most people spend their lives adapting to environments that don't fit them. adjusting themselves to maintain connection, silencing parts of themselves to avoid rejection. But you've crossed that threshold. You've seen what happens when you abandon yourself. You've experienced the cost of overextending your empathy. You've felt the pressure of suppressing your truth. And because of that, you no longer go back. Not out of pride, but out of awareness. And the final transformation, the empath who once absorbed everything becomes someone who chooses what to carry. The person who once felt controlled by emotions becomes someone who understands them. The individual who once sought validation becomes someone who defines their own worth. And this is where the journey completes. Not in becoming untouchable, but in becoming unshakable. The truth Jung left us. With Carl Jung didn't believe the goal of life was to avoid suffering. He believed it was to transform through it, to take what was unconscious and make it conscious, to take what was fragmented and make it whole. And for those who reach this stage, the transformation is irreversible. You don't go back to being unaware. You don't go back to tolerating what breaks you. You don't go back to losing yourself in others. On you move forward, clear, grounded, and finally, yourself.